There is a moment that investigators keep coming back to. Not a boardroom meeting, not a signed contract, not even the firing itself. The moment they keep returning to is a shoebox. An old shoebox at the back of a closet, holding a pair of dress shoes that a young black kid from nowhere had bought the day he decided to take himself seriously. Nobody told him to keep the box. Nobody warned him that inside it, tucked beneath the tissue paper, was a document that would one day be worth more than everything David had ever tried to take from him. He just never threw it away. That is where this story ends. But it is nowhere close to where it begins. Before Reggie Johnson was ever part of this story, there was a man standing alone in a bank lobby being told no. Every institution the owner approached had looked at his business plan and passed. He had sold his home to fund the early groundwork and committed everything he had saved. His best friend from business school had told him plainly he did not believe in the idea and would not be going into business with him. He went forward anyway, alone. By the time he was standing in that first half-built restaurant, disconnected fryers, stacked packaging boxes, he had come further than most people would have survived. He had an appointment with a young man he was almost certainly going to turn away. Reggie Johnson walked through the door at 18 years old with no resume that meant anything. What he had was a question. He had noticed on his way in that the delivery schedule on the back wall was overlapping with the shift rotation in a way that would create a staffing gap every third weekend. Nobody had caught it. Reggie pointed it out before he sat down and had a solution ready before anyone asked. The owner put down his pen and offered Reggie a management position on the spot. There was a third person in the room, David, the owner's son, standing near the back with his arms crossed, watching without saying a word. He was there because his father had asked him to be. He was not there because he wanted to be. The handshake happened right there. Reggie would come in as the owner's first manager, help open new locations, train staff, and be present for every expansion. He would be underpaid until they could get the company profitable. In return, Reggie would receive a percentage of revenue from each store he helped open, but he would not be paid up front, because the owner simply could not afford it at this point. It would instead be held in a trust that would mature the moment he left the company for any reason. It would double if he was ever fired without cause. Reggie shook the man's hand and said yes. David watched and said nothing. The exact percentage was not settled that day. It came later, and it came because of Reggie. The second location was supposed to be a straightforward expansion. The margins on the bank application were not landing where they needed to. Reggie had been reviewing the supply chain costs when he found the problem. Premium branded goods were coming in at prices that in some cases ran more than 3 times higher than comparable alternatives. Angus beef, branded condiments, branded packaging, all sourced at rates that had been set at the beginning and never revisited. Nobody had questioned them because nobody had been assigned to. Reggie built a full comparison-adjusted sourcing, renegotiated terms, corrected quantities. He brought it to the owner in 3 pages and it completely changed the financial picture. The bank approved the loan. Beyond that, the broader day-to-day adjustments Reggie had identified pushed the company's overall profit margin 9% above the industry standard. The owner called Reggie in the following week and told him the trust percentage was 9. The same number Reggie had quietly added to the financial future of a company that a year ago could not get a single bank to return a call. He also told Reggie his title was changing. He was no longer a manager. He was supervisor of expansions. David was not in the building that day. What finally pushed the agreement into legal writing was a near disaster that Reggie prevented. The growth advisors had identified a neighborhood in a new city they believed was ready for expansion. Every number on paper looked right. Reggie asked for 2 weeks. He had heard through a contact that a major manufacturing plant in that area had quietly decided to move operations overseas. The announcement had not gone public yet, but when it did, the economic foundation of that neighborhood would collapse faster than any market report had projected. He came back with a clear recommendation: do not open there. The owner listened. The plant closed 6 weeks later. If the company had committed, they would have opened in the middle of an economic collapse. That was the day the owner stopped treating the agreement as a handshake. He called the attorney the one who worked quietly and by the numbers and told him to put every condition, every term in writing, witnessed, notarized, and filed in a way no future leadership could quietly undo. Reggie signed it. He was 19. He remembered signing something formal, something legal, though the specific terms had faded the way the details of paperwork tend to fade when you are young and busy and the future feels abstract. He filed it away in the back of his mind along with the shoebox from his first real pair of business shoes, and he went back to work. And he worked. For 20 years, Reggie Johnson worked, giving the company all that he had. And with his help, the company grew past anything the owner had imagined when he shook Reggie's hand.
If you have stayed this long, you already know this story is not finished. The next part of Reggie's story is the part that changes everything. Hit like and subscribe to help us grow our new channel. Now let's keep going.
One location became 4. 4 became 20. 20 became over 100. The model worked because Reggie made it work, reading new markets, training staff, carrying the institutional knowledge of the entire operation in a way that no system or software had ever fully replaced. By the time Reggie was in his mid-30s, the company had 717 locations. He had been personally involved in opening every single one. Then the owner passed away, and the man who inherited everything was the same man who had stood in the back of that first restaurant with his arms crossed, saying nothing. David had never loved the work. His father had loved the business the way some people love their children, completely, irrationally, down to the early mornings and the smell of cooking oil. David saw balance sheets. He saw equity, and he saw, with a resentment that had been building for 2 decades, that his father had always spoken about Reggie the way a proud man speaks about someone he considers family. David had a wife. Her name was Sherry White. She was sharp, ambitious, and genuinely talented at running large operations. She had no idea what she was being walked into. The questions started almost immediately after Sherry became CEO. A large sum of money was locked in an account the company could not access. She found it through a routine financial review. It had been growing for years. Nobody could tell her why it could not be touched. The number attorney was called. He explained the funds could not be released under the current conditions of the associated agreement. He did not explain what those conditions were. He answered every question he was legally required to answer, and not one beyond that. What she eventually pieced together was this: the funds would release the moment a specific employee was no longer with the company. That employee was Reggie Johnson. She called him in. She asked whether he was aware of any financial arrangement tied to his employment. He remembered the handshake agreement, signing an agreement early in his time with the company. He could not recall the specific terms. He trusted the owner and at the time didn't think he needed to. He knew it had involved the original owner, his role in the expansions, and he believed there had been a trust. He could not say more than that. Sherry brought in the legal team. They reviewed every employment record, every compensation agreement, every trust document in the corporate archive. They found nothing under Reggie's name. The reserve account existed under a numbered reference code, but without the original filing, there was nothing to connect it to him. The lead attorney told Sherry plainly, a vague recollection of signing something with no documentation the employee could produce and nothing in the company's records had no legal standing. Sherry also spoke to her husband. David told her, with the calm confidence of a man who had been rehearsing this for years, that no verbal agreement had been put into play. Certainly no formal agreement had ever existed. He had been present in the early days. He knew how his father operated. If something like that had been put in legal writing, David said, there would always be a paper trail. She believed him. She had a legal team saying the claim had no foundation. She had a husband she trusted saying it never happened. She had a company burning through capital with a reserve account that could solve it. The only condition between the company and those funds was the continued employment of a man whose role multiple voices had already called redundant. She convinced herself the two things were not connected. She was wrong. Reggie was called in on a Tuesday morning in late autumn. Sherry told him clearly, and not unkindly, that his position had been eliminated. 20 years, standard severance. He sat with that for a moment. Somewhere in the back of his mind was the memory of an agreement, a trust, something signed, something promised that the company's CEO had just finished telling him did not exist. He had spent 20 years quietly believing there was something waiting for him. Now the only person left who could have confirmed it was gone. He breathed in slowly, stood without saying another word, and went home. That evening he started going through old boxes. His wife found him after midnight sitting on the closet floor, holding a pair of shoes. The kind a young man buys when he wants the world to take him seriously. He had bought them the same week he took the job. He had worn them to the notary appointment. He had been too young and too excited that day to pay attention to the paper sitting beneath the tissue paper in the box. His wife told him to keep the shoes. And as he fitted the first shoe back into the box, that is when he noticed the folded document inside. He pulled out the document and instantly recognized exactly what he now held in his hands. That next morning, Reggie found an attorney. Not the number attorney, not anyone connected to the company. He put the document on the table, and she read every word. Then she read it again. She said, "You were fired." He nodded. She said, "Without cause." He nodded again. She said, "Do you understand if this account number matches the trust what this document will mean?" He said he was beginning to. 9% of revenue from each store opening he had been personally involved in, held in a managed trust, funded automatically, protected for 20 years by a numbered filing that Sherry's legal team had found but could not decode. The number attorney had not been hiding the account. He had been protecting it, structured precisely so no future administration could quietly dissolve it. His job had been to honor the terms exactly as written. He had done his job. 717 stores, 9% per location. 20 years of revenue, doubled. The company disputed the figure, then the interpretation, then several other things in sequence. Then, as the legal process moved forward and the document kept saying exactly what it had always said, the company stopped disputing. Investigators eventually asked the question at the center of everything. Whose idea was it to eliminate Reggie's position? Sherry had signed the paperwork, but the business case she had used was built for her quietly, over months by the one person with the most to gain. David had never put the recommendation in writing. He framed it always as reluctant business observation. He had publicly defended Reggie on at least 2 occasions before the firing. But investigators found text messages between David and a financial consultant, a single conversation 4 months before the termination, asking how long the locked account would take to release once the employment condition was lifted. He had known the entire time, and he had made sure every visible fingerprint belonged to someone else. The envy had never gone away. His father had spoken about Reggie at company events and deferred to Reggie's judgment on expansions, David believed. Should have been his to approve. After his father's death, that old resentment had hardened into something calculated. He did not just want Reggie gone. He wanted Reggie gone with nothing, no document, no case, no understanding of what he was walking away from. When Reggie had sat in Sherry's office and described signing some kind of agreement, David had told his wife privately it was the reach of a desperate man. It had been 20 years. He had been almost certain that nothing like the shoebox would exist. Almost. There was a meeting nobody expected. When the legal picture became undeniable, David requested to speak with Reggie directly. His attorney was present. Reggie's attorney was present. Whatever David had planned to say in that room, whatever version of himself he had prepared to walk in with, it did not survive the first few minutes. Reggie did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He simply looked at the man who had watched his father shake his hand 20 years ago and done nothing, and then spent 2 decades building a case for why that hand should have been empty. There was nothing left for David to explain, and no version of an explanation that would have changed what the document said. The meeting was short. David left without the outcome he had come in hoping for. His position within the company did not survive what followed. The board moved quickly. His removal was handled with the same quiet efficiency that had once been used to obscure Reggie's agreement. Sherry White, to her credit, did not walk away. She reached out to Reggie privately, separate from the legal proceedings, and made him an offer she believed in genuinely. She proposed a formal partnership. Reggie would allow a portion of the settlement funds to remain accessible to the company, not surrendered, structured as a time-limited arrangement to be used specifically to fulfill the original owner's ambition of reaching 1,000 locations. In return, Reggie would receive an equity stake and a seat at the table he had earned 20 years ago and never been given. It was not an unreasonable offer. Sherry was not an unreasonable person. She had been deceived, and she knew it, and this was her attempt to build something honest from the wreckage of what David had arranged. Reggie thought about it carefully. Then he declined. He had given 20 years to someone else's dream, genuinely, without reservation, with everything he had. He had saved the company from a bad expansion. He had fixed the supply chain. He had trained the people and opened the doors and read the markets and done the work that turned one restaurant into 717. And at the moment he had needed the company to believe him, its leadership had looked at his 20 years and decided he was lying. Not because the evidence said so, because it was more convenient to believe he was. He did not say any of that to Sherry. What he said was that he appreciated the offer and that he had his own plans. Both of those things were true. The plans he had were the kind that had been forming quietly for years, in the back of a mind that was always, underneath everything else, running the numbers. He understood supply chains and market timing and the mechanics of keeping an organization alive better than most. People who had gone to school specifically to learn those things. He had been applying those instincts on behalf of someone else's company for 2 decades. It was time to apply them somewhere of his own. What happened to the company without him was not a collapse. It was something slower, and in some ways harder to watch. The rapid expansion that Sherry had staked her strategy on began to stall without the capital she had counted on and without the judgment that had quietly kept the growth honest for years. Locations that would never have been approved under the old framework were approved. Some failed, then more failed. The board made corrections. The corrections came too late. By the time the contraction was recognized for what it was, the company had shed nearly 450 locations. It stabilized somewhere below 300, fragile, restructured, a fraction of what it had been held together by the systems and the training and the institutional logic that Reggie had built so deeply into the operation that even his absence could not completely undo it. That was, in the end, the measure of what he had contributed. The company survived without him only because of what he had left behind. Sherry White did not know. The evidence supported that. She had been used, handed a version of the truth assembled by someone with a motive she never saw. Settlement terms were sealed. The document was not. Reggie Johnson was 38 years old when he walked out of those proceedings with the full weight of what a 20-year promise was worth, and in this case it was worth millions of dollars. He had not been erased. He had been carried through 2 decades of someone else's resentment by a piece of paper in a shoebox at the back of a closet. His attorney was asked why the account had never surfaced in normal operations. She said it was not supposed to surface. It was supposed to release quietly, automatically, exactly as written the moment the condition was met. The document did not need to be found. It needed to outlast the people who hoped it would be forgotten. It did. The man who started this company had been turned away by every bank in the city. His best friend had walked away from his dream. He sold his home and went forward alone. He recognized something in a teenager who pointed at a problem on a back wall and already had the answer. Some promises outlast the people who made them. Some documents know more about a man's future than he does the day he signs them. And some shoeboxes, sitting quietly in the back of a closet for 20 years, are not holding the past. They're holding the answer.
If this story moved you, a like and subscribe takes 1 second and means more than you know. And if you want to make sure you never miss an episode, because the algorithm does not always keep its promises, the link to our priority notification list is in the description. We will come straight to you. Thanks for watching.